Providence, 1834. Population, 16,000. It's easy to idealize those times as kinder, simpler, even pastoral. But they were not. Some enjoyed a middle-class life or better, but many more who came from Europe to escape poverty or famine found themselves huddling in slums, without work, without hope. But those who suffered the most were their children. Some begged on the streets. Others learned the harshest of lessons at the mercy of mindless machines, hungry for tiny fingers and hands. Because in 1834, 55% of the factory labor force in Providence was comprised of children as young as 7, working 14 hours a day. It was a crueler, darker world, and our young country's heart was still hard and immature. But one woman was determined to make a difference in the lives of poor children. Her name was Harriet Ware, and 175 years ago she founded the oldest child welfare organization in the state, the Providence Children's Friend Society, known today as Children's Friend.
Harriet Ware was a school teacher born in Massachusetts who was recruited by a church group of benevolent ladies to come to the India Point area of Providence to help teach the city's poorest children.
The general idea about children was that their fates were very much tied to the fates of their parents. So if their parents were paupers, children would probably be paupers. Harriet Ware was, from the very earliest days, a real advocate for this idea that we shouldn't think that children's lives are over simply because their parents are paupers. So she was very much a believer in the poorest of children.
Harriet Ware began her work with these children by starting a Sunday school in the India Point neighborhood, despite advice from community leaders who warned her against it.
I was told by such that the object must be abandoned, that the people were completely savage, that it was an improper place for a female, and that a child 8 years old would turn me out of school. I felt greatly encouraged and was determined at all events to persevere.
The Sunday school soon evolved into a 5-day school and eventually into a home where Harriet took in children who had been abandoned or whose parents could no longer take care of them. She educated them and then tried to place them with new families. Harriet supported her efforts for the children with money she raised from people in the community, whose names are familiar to us even today: Lippitt, Brown, Chafee, DeWolf, Goddard, Ives, and Tillinghast.
Never did the privilege of providing homes for little wretched children appear so valuable. I have often thought that, with or without support, I will never again complain of fatigue or perplexity, as long as one neglected child remains in these streets that I can benefit from removing.
Harriet Ware, as described by her biographer Frances Whalen, who became a lifelong supporter and confidant, was a very plain woman, had a sense of humor, did not make much of an impression on people upon first meeting, had no wealth of her own, had no training to do anything that she ended up doing. So I think what we see in Harriet Ware is an ability to understand her limitations, but also to always push forward with her vision.
The lesson which can be learned from the life of Harriet Ware teaches us that a great power for good is placed in the hands of all of us, if we had but the energy and self-sacrifice to use it.
The Children's Friend Society was founded for the purpose of providing for the support and education of indigent children of both sexes, not otherwise provided for, and who, for want of paternal care, are in a suffering and dangerous condition. The object of the society shall be to rescue from evil and misery such children as are deprived of the care of their natural protectors.
Harriet was able to raise enough money in contributions to buy a small house on the northeast corner of Stewart and Broad Streets to continue the society's work. This remained the home of Children's Friend until 1863.
The first child admitted to our home was a 5-year-old boy, Otis W. Barlow. He remained with us until January of 1845, when his indentures were given up to his mother's husband, Mr. George Gibbs. He now goes to sea. The Macmillan sisters, Mary, 9 years, and Eliza, 7 years, children of intemperate parents, and taken from the extremes of poverty and suffering, found to be remarkably truthful, honest, and amiable. They were taken by Deacon Wiles of Shrewsbury, where they were carefully educated and treated in every respect like daughters.
Harriet Ware was a true social entrepreneur. Harriet had this idea that she could, without having any money of her own, without having any influence really, that she could create something brand new. And she experimented a lot.
Many of the practices Harriet put into place were extremely innovative for the time. She helped not only orphans, but children with poor parents who couldn't take care of their children. She put boys and girls together in the same home. She provided education and training before placing children out with new families. And she developed tracking methods to monitor the children's progress even after they had left the home.
If you look at the records, for example, a journal in the 1850s, there's detailed notes about children who entered the home, chronicling everything that happens to the child. Child went to sea, child married a good man, child became promising despite discouraging influences. So they really did keep quite detailed notes, not only about children as they cared for them, but also as they left the home.
Fundraising presented a major challenge with every passing year.
Surely goodness and mercy have followed us every step of the way. You will not infer that we have had not trials, that no clouds have gathered over us thick and dark, threatening to destroy us. Oh no! God has been too merciful to allow us to be ruined with prosperity. But I believe He has given us as much success as we could possibly bear.
Harriet Ware died in 1847 at the age of 47 from cancer, just 14 years after she began the work of the Providence Children's Friends Society. At its meeting immediately after her death, the board resolved,
"This institution has sustained a heavy and irreparable loss. As individuals, they lament the loss of an intelligent, generous friend. Also resolve that this is the earnest desire of the board to maintain the interests and extend the usefulness of this institution, now bequeathed to them by its self-denying founder."